In a move that has shattered the foundational principles of Europe's post-war security architecture, the United States has launched an aggressive and public campaign to compel the nation of Austria to abandon its decade-long status of constitutional neutrality and seek full membership in the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. The demand, delivered with the subtlety of a sledgehammer, came directly from President Donald Trump, who declared in a surprise statement from the White House lawn that in the new era of global confrontation, there are no more sidelines, and that Austria's neutrality was now an unacceptable vulnerability in the united Western Front against Russian aggression. This latest diplomatic bombshell, coming on the heels of the ultimatum to Russia, the forced EU trade deal, and the formation of an anti-China military pact in the Pacific, represents the most audacious step yet in the Trump administration's rapid and radical reshaping of the global order. It is a direct assault on the sovereignty of a friendly nation and a deliberate effort to erase the last vestige of strategic ambiguity in Europe, forcing every nation into one of two opposing camps. The American pressure campaign was rolled out with swift and overwhelming force. Following President Trump's initial declaration, Secretary of State Marco Rubio placed a formal call to the Austrian Chancellor in Vienna. Diplomatic sources described the conversation not as a negotiation but as a notification. Secretary Rubio reportedly conveyed that the United States was formally inviting Austria to begin the accession process to join NATO immediately, adding that Washington was prepared to fast-track its membership. He argued that the ongoing crisis with Russia demonstrated that neutrality was a dangerous illusion and that the only true guarantees of Austrian security and sovereignty was the collective defense promise of NATO's Article 5. He presented the move as a logical and necessary step for Austria's own self-preservation. This diplomatic pressure was backed by a stark military message from Secretary of Defense Peter Hegseth. In a press briefing at the Pentagon, Secretary Hegseth displayed maps showing Austria as a geographic gap between NATO allies Italy and Germany. He explained that Austria's neutrality created a strategic seam that could be exploited by adversary, hindering the free movement of allied forces in a crisis. He stated that Austria's inclusion would create a contiguous and more defensible southern front, significantly enhancing NATO's overall military posture. The intelligence justification was provided by Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard, who informed congressional leaders that her agencies had collected significant intelligence, indicating that Russia was actively using Austria's neutral status as a hub for espionage and influence operations aimed at destabilizing Europe, making its neutrality a security risk not just for Austria, but for the entire alliance. The American demands has plunged Austria into its most profound political and existential crisis since its re-establishment as a sovereign state in 1955. For Austria, neutrality is not merely a foreign policy choice. It is the very cornerstone of its modern national identity. It is enshrined in its constitution and is inextricably linked to the Austrian State Treaty, the agreement with the Allied powers and the Soviet Union that ended the 10 years post-war occupation and gave birth to the Second Austrian Republic. In exchange for the withdrawal of all foreign troops, Austria pledged itself to permanent neutrality. This principle has been the bedrock of its foreign policy ever since, allowing it to serve as a bridge between East and West during the Cold War and to become a respected international mediator and a host for major international organizations like the United Nations and the OSCE. The American demand is therefore seen not just as a policy suggestion, but as an attack on the very soul of the nation. The Austrian government is caught in an impossible and agonizing position. The Chancellor is facing immense and contradictory pressure. On one side is the full weight of the American superpower, a nation that is both a critical economic partner and the ultimate guarantor of wider European security, now making a demand that is framed as a test of loyalty. On the other side is the nation's own constitution, its history, and the overwhelming sentiment of its people. The Austrian cabinet is reportedly deeply and bitterly divided. Pro-Atlanticist factions argue that the world has changed irrevocably, that Russia's actions have rendered neutrality obsolete and dangerous, and that refusing the American offer would leave Austria isolated and vulnerable without allies in a newly dangerous world. They advocate for accepting the reality of the situation and beginning negotiations with NATO. Opposing them are the traditionalists and legal purists who argue that abandoning neutrality would be a historic betrayal of the nation's founding principle and a reckless act that would make Austria a frontline state and a primary target in any future conflict with Russia. They contended that it would be a voluntary surrender of the country's sovereignty and its unique role in the world. The crisis has spilled onto the street of Vienna and other Austrian cities, cleaving the public in two. Large demonstrations have been held in front of the Hofburg Palace and the Chancellery. One group of protesters waving Austrian and European Union flags alongside NATO banners chant slogans in support of joining the alliance, expressing their fear of Russian expansionism and their belief that only NATO can protect them. They see neutrality as a relic of a bygone era. Facing them across police lines are much larger crowds of counter-protesters, a diverse coalition of peace activists, traditionalists, and anti-American groups. They carry signs that read, "Our neutrality is not negotiable," and "Austria is not an American colony." They see the American demand as an act of imperial bullying and a dangerous step that would drag their country into foreign wars. The debate is raging in every cafe, every workplace, and every family, forcing Austrians to confront fundamental questions about their identity and their place in the world. The reaction from Moscow was one of predictable and unrestrained fury. The Russian Foreign Ministry issued a blistering statement condemning the American pressure campaign as a gross violation of international law and a direct breach of the spirit and letter of the 1955 State Treaty. A Russian government spokesperson warned that any move by Austria to join NATO would be seen as a hostile act that would have grave and irreversible consequences for both Austrian and European security. He stated that Russia would be forced to take military technical countermeasures to address the new threat on its doorstep. Russian diplomats across Europe delivered formal protests to their host government, warning that the destruction of Austrian neutrality would demolish one of the last remaining pillars of European stability and would make a broader continental conflict far more likely. Moscow's message was clear: Austrian neutrality is a red line, and its violation would be met with severe retaliation. The American move has also sent shockwave through the very institutions of Western unity. Within NATO, the demand has been met with a mixture of support and horror, exposing the deep divisions that President Trump's policies have created. The Eastern European members, led by Poland, the Baltic states, and Romania, have enthusiastically welcomed the proposal. They see it as a long overdue step to strengthen the alliance's eastern flank and to eliminate a potential vector of Russian influence in Central Europe. They share the American view that neutrality is an outdated concept in the face of a revanchist Russia. However, in Western Europe, the mood is one of deep alarm and anger. The French government, a longtime advocate for European strategic autonomy, sees the American move as a reckless and unilateral act that further subordinates European security to the whims of Washington. The German government, already reeling from the trade deal, is aghast at the potential destabilization of its southern neighbor. Leaders in Paris and Berlin fears that President Trump is systematically dismantling the entire European security order with no thought for the consequences, creating instability and forcing confrontations that Europe does not want. Brussels, the headquarters of both the European Union and NATO, has been reduced to a state of stunned paralysis, its leader powerless to influence the action of their most powerful member. The campaign to force Austria into NATO is the capstone of President Trump's New World Order strategy. It is the final piece of the puzzle, a move to consolidate a single, unified, American-led political, economic, and military bloc, having secured Europe's economic submission through the new trade deal, having established a clear military front against China in the Pacific, and having boxed in Russia with a military ultimatum over Ukraine. The administration is now moving to eliminate the last pocket of non-alignment in a critical part of Europe. The message is absolute. In this new world, there is no middle ground. Nations are either with the United States or they are against it. The strategy is to create a clear and unambiguous bipolar world, simplifying complex global politics into a straightforward confrontation between us and them. But in pursuing this aggressive simplification, the Trump administration is generating instability on a scale not seen in generations. The fate of Austria, a nation that has built its modern identity on peace and neutrality, now hangs in the balance. Its decision, forced upon it under duress, could either be the final step in the consolidation of a new American-led alliance or the trigger for the next catastrophic escalation in a world already teetering on the brink of chaos. Many of my listeners, like 70%, haven't subscribed to my YouTube channel. And so many of you don't even know that you haven't subscribed. And that is actually what makes the show going. It's almost like you're making a donation to the show. So that's why I ask again and again, because it enables us to grow and grow and grow. And we're going for the long haul here. And listen, if this is your first time listening to Soak Heinrich, you don't have to subscribe. You guys, your first one's on me. But if you have watched the show before, it's like you are a freeloader now. So all I would ask you is, if you have seen the show before and you like it, help me, help my team here. Hit that subscribe and like button now, and we will continue to build this show for you. That I swear. Thank you to all of you guys who have subscribed. It means a lot to me. Thank you so much. That's all for me for today. I will see you soon. Bye for now.